Land Cruiser. Think about that name for a second. It holds just as much value as the whole Land Rover nameplate. But these, they're going to get you to the wilderness and back. I've seen so many of these 100 series Land Cruisers with well over 200,000 miles for well over $10,000. Why is that? The Toyota Land Cruiser started off to be called the Toyota BJ in 1951. It was intended to be a bigger and more powerful Willys Jeep. The US government actually instructed Toyota to build 100 of these bigger Willys Jeeps using the same Jeep Willys architecture. They were only available for military use. The 20 Series Land Cruiser came out in 1955, and this was the beginning of the more civilian-oriented Land Cruiser. Not luxurious or comfortable, but it was something that the civilian market could buy. This was also the beginning of the FJ nameplate, and the FJ was revised over the years from the FJ20 to the FJ30 and the FJ40. Around the same time in the mid-50s, Toyota decided to dip their feet into the full-size wagon market. They split the Land Cruiser into two versions. The FJ would be the comfort and luxury-oriented Land Cruisers, and the BJs would be the off-road oriented Land Cruisers. We're going to focus on the FJs. That brings us to the FJ50. It was the first ever four-door and fully enclosed Land Cruiser. It used the same powertrain from the FJ45, but it had a completely different body. It was primarily designed for the US and Australia, and production ended in 1980. We now migrate to the FJ60. It ran from 1980 to 1990. This was also the Land Cruiser that started the Land Cruiser cult, as I call it. The FJ60 was available with various petrol and diesel engines, but as Americans, we only got the 4-liter straight 6. That same engine got fuel injection in 1988, along with other revisions to the Land Cruiser body, and it was renamed to be the FJ62. Toyota released the beloved FJ80 in 1989. Most 80s had a full-time 4-wheel drive system with an available front center and rear differential locker, which is also called triple lock. This is a really rare feature and a really sought-after feature for 80 series Land Cruisers. 80 series Land Cruisers also had two engines over the years. From 1990 to 1993, they had a 4-liter 6-cylinder engine, the same one as the FJ62. That engine was dated and lethargic, so Toyota axed that engine and replaced it for a 4.5-liter 6-cylinder. 1993 brought the bigger 4.5-liter 6-cylinder. 1995 added ABS, a driver and passenger side airbag, and a different grille with the more modern Toyota emblem like this one. Toyota also introduced the Lexus LX, in this case the LX 450, to the market. It was essentially a Land Cruiser that was rebadged. All it had was a different grille, different emblems of course, slightly different wheels, but it was pretty much the same thing. Same engine, same transmission too. Now that transitions us to the 100 series like this one. It came out in 1998. It was also known as the Lexus LX 450 because of its 4.7-liter V8 engine. You couldn't get these with a front or rear locker, but all of them had a full-time 4-wheel drive system with the center locker and also A-Track, which is pretty much one of the best off-road traction control systems out there. The 100 series was wider and longer than the 80 series. They went from a solid front axle in the 80 series to an independent front suspension in the 100 series. For more on-road comfort, and it did sacrifice a bit of off-road ability, but these things are still insanely off-road capable. Toyota released the 200 series Land Cruiser in 2008. The Sequoia, Tundra, and Land Cruiser offered the same 5.7-liter I-Force V8 with 381 horsepower. The same engine that they used 13 years later in the brand new Land Cruiser Tundra and Sequoia. But Toyota did revise them over the years. Like in 2013, they got their first refresh, which is my favorite. And in 2016, it was redesigned again. Modern and upfitting for, you know, the new times. 200 series Land Cruiser also brought a lot of creature comforts and luxuries to the Land Cruiser name, like push-button start with smart key access, quad zone climate control, navigation, a backup camera, and other kinds of new technology for the 2000s. This Land Cruiser in particular is a 2003 painted in OEM natural white. Toyota didn't offer these with any options at all besides color and accessories. They all came pretty loaded. The 100 series Land Cruiser has such a distinctive look to it, especially to people that know what it is. It definitely has a presence on the road. It's big and it makes it known. All cruisers of this era have halogen headlights and fog lights, no HIDs or LEDs here. These have also been known to just be big boxes, and honestly, I like it that way. The Land Cruiser has 9.8 inches of stock ground clearance. The rear of the Land Cruiser is where things are pretty handy for overlanders. The split tailgate is one of my favorite features on these. Opening the trunk reveals 20 cubic feet of volume behind the third row and up to 90 cubic feet with the second and third row out of the way. The third row in these was removable, but it also stowed to the side like the forerunner of this era. The Land Cruiser can tow up to 6,500 pounds. Toyotas of this era are my absolute favorite. The build quality is top-notch front to back. It's refreshing going back to an era of simplicity compared to today's rolling computers. The seats in this Land Cruiser are immensely comfortable. I could go anywhere with this thing. This thing just exudes the feeling of just going anywhere and being comfortable and not worried about going and coming back. And they've also worn pretty well too for 200,000 miles. They have, you know, like minimal wear, like a few cracks, but that's it. That's up to par with early to mid 2000s Toyota quality. The steering wheel in this Land Cruiser is aftermarket. It's a Chinese steering wheel, but I actually like it more than the OEM steering wheel. It's a little bit more comfortable, more supportive. It does have the nice wood trim that feels just like the Toyotas of this era wood trim. It feels really nice. It just makes it a little bit nicer to drive. I like it more. And you have some audio controls on the left and a voice control button on the right, and Toyota's old cruise control stock over there. After that are the gauges. I like the gauges on this thing. They're not like the Lexuses and some Toyotas of this era, unfortunately, how it looks like it's electroluminescent, where they just disappear when you shut the engine off, and then, you know, like, so you can see them all the time. They are backlit. I still do like the design of the gauges. There's 4 pods. On the left side, you have a voltmeter and the fuel gauge. I like that you get more information in this. Then you have the speedo, the tach, and then on the right side, you have oil pressure and coolant temperature. So I like that you get, you know, a little bit more information than the average SUV. On the left side of the steering wheel, you have 2 buttons that open and close the third row vent windows. They just open just a little bit. I find that interesting that there's 2 independent buttons for it. Anyway, looking at the center stack, it is dated, but it doesn't look like it. The screen just kind of looks obsolete, and it's not exactly obsolete. It is usable. There is a learning curve, and that I'm still dealing with it because I've had this car for about a day and I am still confused. I just to find things, because Toyota tried to eliminate hard touch buttons by putting a lot of the things in the screen. Like for the climate, you have to press climate to get to the climate control to change the fan speed and the direction. So that is like kind of annoying, but you do have the temperature and some other hard touch buttons underneath that. Underneath that, you have some hard touch buttons for the JBL stereo. It has a tape deck, and there's a CD changer in the center console. The audio system sounds really good. I also find it interesting that you have an individual button that controls the radio antenna. So if you can press it to go up and you can press it to go down. I find that interesting. Helpful when you're going off-roading. You can keep it down so it doesn't get torn off like by a tree. But I am impressed that it still works, because the 3rd gen 4Runners that were out around this time, that was very common for the antennas to stop working. Behind that you have your shifter for the 5-speed auto. You know, shifts real nice. It feels like a Lexus. Everything in here feels like a Lexus. So for the 4-wheel drive, this thing is always 4-wheel drive. So it's in high range right now, but it's technically all-wheel drive because the center diff is open. So you press that and it locks it, or if you put it in 4-low, it automatically locks that center diff. Power mode and a 2nd gear mode for the transmission in this thing. Power mode is more for towing. It just keeps the RPMs a little bit higher, and then 2nd starts the thing off in 2nd gear so you don't slip as much when you're on ice or snow. Your heated seat controls are next to the shifter. You know, just high and low. No cooled seats. I think that was reserved to the LX. And this also doesn't have height control, which is something that I'm glad this Land Cruiser doesn't have. The Lexus has had it. It's just, it's not that much better than the regular suspension. And it's more expensive when the thing goes out. And it makes it a little bit harder to lift. You have 2 cup holders behind that, which are reasonably sized, but they're a little bit shallow. Then behind that, you have a 2-tier center console. You have an upper little storage thing, and then bottom storage with the CD player, well, the CD changer. And then there's a little tray that you can remove, and then that reveals more storage and a power outlet. The rear seat of the Land Cruiser is also a nice place to be. Since this thing is shaped like a box, headroom is phenomenal. I'm 5'8", and I have great headroom. The seat is all the way back because it does an easy exit thing, and I have like 3 inches of legroom, and I can fit my feet under the seat, the driver's seat. I'm really comfortable. It's like sitting on a couch, honestly. Something that I find interesting is that you have an ashtray on both doors. I don't know, it's like everyone's smoking because it has a cigarette lighter and an ashtray on this door and the other door, so you can have your kids smoking too, I guess. I don't know. Behind the center console, you have rear audio controls. It looks like you could plug headphones back in there. Guess it goes to the radio or the CD player or whatever, but there's no DVD system in this one. I do think that was optional. And then under that, you have 2 cup holders, which are, you know, again, reasonably sized. And then you have an armrest, which has no cup holders because there's 2 over here. But, you know, it's nice and soft. This is wide enough that 3 adults can sit here very comfortably. Very comfortably. This one doesn't have the 3rd row because it's in the owner's attic. But the 3rd row wasn't that big because it didn't tumble into the floor, it just folded up. So, but the rear seats are also a very accommodating place to be. Behold, the 4.7 liter Toyota 2UZ FE V8. It makes a modest 230 horsepower, especially modest for something that's 5,300 pounds, and 320 pound-feet of torque, which is somewhat respectable. Over the years, the Land Cruiser did get a little bit more power, but since this is the first iteration of the 2UZ FE with no upgrades, 230 horsepower. These things are also pretty thirsty to have a V8 and 5,300 pounds, 13 city and 17 highway. I've been driving this thing for a few days and I've been getting about 14. So these things are not too fun, especially at the pump, because this has a 25-gallon fuel tank. Oh, I forgot to mention, I like that you have a regular handbrake in the Land Cruiser, not like a foot brake. I like that it's there. It's nice. It's a nice feeling. So I've had this Land Cruiser for about maybe a day so far, and I've been driving it a lot, and I've really been enjoying it. So if you don't have time to watch the full drive, it feels expensive even though it's 20 years old. It has such a solid feeling The engine and transmission are so smooth. The ride is really good for being on a truck frame, and I genuinely see why these things cost so much still. But that is the condensed version. Now, once the light turns green, we can get into the rest of the video. So these Bethesda roads are not that forgiving. There's always construction everywhere, and it handles the bumps very well. I've noticed on a lot of places where with my Tacoma, the rear axle hops, this just goes right over it. It doesn't hop. There's no unrefinement in this thing at all. The interior is just so quiet, and it's also really easy to look out of this thing because it's like a box. You know, you can just see everywhere. There's no blind spots. The mirrors are big. It's easy to drive. It does feel big. You can feel the mass of this thing. I really have no sense of urgency driving this thing. It just feels like it's a cruiser. I just feel like I want to cruise with it and nothing more than that. But for the sake of the video and my curiosity, we will see how this 4.7 liter V8 propels this 5,300 pound mass of metal and leather. Here we go. Wow, okay, so like it's not slow, and it was weird. There was some weird like movement in the front, almost like torque steer, probably because the thing was like, oh, you know, I have to shift power around, but now it's so smooth. I mean, it gets out of its way. It doesn't feel underpowered. It's very smooth. It's very smooth. Now that I got that out of the way, the thing rides really nice. It rides better than the Sequoia of this time. And that is like one of the reasons why you'd get this over a Sequoia, because those are the two things that people look at, like, you know, which one's better. I like how this thing rides. This thing just it drives with such a good feeling of solidity. I have not driven anything so solid before. Now, the handling of this thing is not the best. I'm going around this corner. It did not roll as much as I thought it would have, though. But of course, it's not like you're gonna be driving a Highlander. They always say, you buy a Range Rover to go out into the wild, and you buy a Land Cruiser to go out and come back. But really, these things are one of the most off-road capable and reliable vehicles on the market today. And that's why they hold their value so well. All you have to worry about for Land Cruisers is regular maintenance items like the timing belt, water pump, tires, brakes, just all the things that go through normal wear and tear. And that's why they hold their value so well. 100 series Land Cruisers, I've seen them go from anywhere from like $10,000 to $20,000. And that's depending on the shape. This one is probably around the top end of that. And the prices of these things are only going up, which is wild. But these things are getting more and more popular because the new Land Cruiser is too expensive and has too much tech in it. And the 100 series Land Cruiser is kind of perfect to be the best overlander out there, at least one of them. It has a great engine, which is solid and reliable. It's very off-road capable. It's spacious. It's reasonably priced. What more is there to ask? Who could ask for